Hi everyone. So there was a really mixed bag of submissions for uh, some of these camera raw files. So I decided I'm just going to do one that you can see an overview of how I would do it. And hopefully this will give you an idea. Now the biggest problem that I'm seeing is actually a problem with visual literacy, where you can't see where you've pushed the file too far and adapted it accordingly. So this is the first one, the curves image. We have two types of curves, parametric and point curve. If we do parametric, you may find it easier. As you can see, the horses will white out if I do the highlights. I'm losing information there. If I do lights, it's lightening the whole image. So it's going to be a little bit, working out what you can do. And remember, you don't always have to move the sliders in the same direction. So then darks, but opening out the shadows a little bit. Can we get the shadows out? Maybe we need to increase the darks. So this is a way that I tend to work. That was the before, that is the after. It's subtle. It's brought a little bit more sky in. It's made the ground jump out a little bit more, and the white horses still have all their detail on it. So your other option is to do a point curve. This is our typical S curve. S increases contrast. You can slide it up, and again you can see the before and after, and get a pretty good idea of what you want from that. Now there's a whole load of other things in here that I didn't ask you to do, but I'm going to quickly run through them. If I wanted to increase the blue sky, I would go to HSL grayscale, and you want to be in a luminance setting, and here I can pull in a blue sky. I can also increase the saturation of that blue sky, and they're breaking up a lot with the clouds and everything, just because they are low res files, but you can get the idea. So here we have a pretty high contrast file. For me this would be a little bit contrasty, but nice thing about Camera Raw, I can go back to these tone curves and just make them a little bit more gentle. I could even bring in so that it's slightly lighter. I've still got that coming through. The horses are not as white as before, so maybe I need to get them up at least to just above the middle ground, and have something like that. Okay, so that's the first one. Second one, this was one that a lot of people had trouble with. I'm going to have to open it because it's a JPEG and Camera Raw. I actually want to close these down because these were from yesterday. So with this, I said to use the adjustment brush. So sweep across the top. If you want to see where your mask is, you can click down here. That's the mask across the sky. I have no settings on here, so you're not seeing anything. So I can now close down the exposure and just darken that sky up a little bit. I can even pull down the highlights and that will darken it up. It's a very, very flat sky, very typical of England. I can add a colour. So if I think that the colour should be a bluey colour or a grey colour, you know, I can pull that in. I probably, in reality, would use the gradient adjustment, not this one. But you can see what I'm doing here. So next thing I would add is a new adjustment. And I just want to remove any of the other settings. I'm just going to add a little bit of green in the grass. And here we have that. I'm going to add another new adjustment. And adding in green in there. There's quite a bit of blue in this grass, so you can always pick it up. Anytime you hold your mouse over it, you'll get the mask, or you can look at it like that. So, you know, I could fill in this area. I'll turn the mask off, and, you know, I might go for a little bit of a warmer grass, so something like that. Now to do the people, there's no easy way. You're going to have to come in, you're going to have to make a new adjustment. And I'm going to do it very quickly because I don't want you to have to watch a 20-minute recording. If you go over the edge too much, you're going to end up with haloing around there. And I'm going to make them warm. So I'm going for a yellowish shade. I'm also going to increase the highlights and the shadows. And there you have it. So that was what it was, and that is what it is now. And again, I would be the first to admit that it's not perfect because I did it in a hurry, but you can see within a few minutes I was able to get something that lit up the people, lit up the foreground, darkened up the sky a little bit, but everything is in sync with everything else. So, you know, we have that ratio in there. So we'll say okay to that. Okay, this one was a confusing one because it had fill light. Fill light was something they got rid of ages ago. It's now just shadows. So you can pull in the shadows, and any area that's in shadow it will bring in. You know, by all means play with other things in here like the clarity. I wouldn't adjust the exposure, but I may adjust the contrast. Sometimes I lower contrast to get that detail in there. And you know, if you go for highlights, it's going to lighten your sky. So you're going to end up with something that went from that to that. If that feels too light to you, lower your shadows down. You could also try bringing up the blacks. It's not going to do a huge amount, but it will bring in some black into it. And it's still going to have that fill light on the boats at the front. Incidentally, and I didn't ask you guys to do this, you can work with the gradient filter. This is what it's for. The reason I'm doing this rather than HSL grayscale is simply because HSL grayscale, there's so much going to be blue in the image, so I need to bring it down some other way. And remember, we've got yellow in here. Bring in blue. And you may even be able to go for a purpley colour so that it feels like it's dusk. So it's a lot of tweaking, it's a lot of going back and forth with the way that we do this. So here was the original, and we've kind of swapped that. So we've darkened the sky, lightened the boat, so we've lightened the foreground area. You could use the adjustment brush also to bring extra bits in if you wanted to, but it's not necessary. So the next one, the pool. A lot of people seem to struggle with the pool one. This I thought would be one of the easiest ones. Gradient, pools in the sky, really easy. I have a slightly purple sky, so let's go for a more blue sky. And then I would argue that you want to bring in these areas. First of all, I don't want it to be anywhere near as dark as that, but I do want some clarity on it so that you can see the detail on there. And in terms of colour, you can look at different colours on here. You know, the blueness gave the concrete, but I would just probably go for pure grey. And I would bring a second one up on here. I would take the clarity down a little bit on that and bring the exposure up a little bit on that to even it out. To do the water, and you weren't asked to do this, but you can do the water. I'm just doing it again very roughly. So you can get something that looks a little bit hyper-real. And again, add a colour. So you could go for the kind of sea colour or a bluey colour that's more in keeping with the sky. And you'll end up with something that looks like that. Okay, I think most of you actually did really well with the Stephanie image, spot removal, and I apologize, this image is pretty small. I think I opened it in Photoshop. So spot removal brush. And don't forget that you can move around these, so if you feel that it's not blending in very well, then just shift it around. I much prefer doing this bit in Photoshop. And in terms of what you're removing, basically you're removing anything, not a freckle, but a blemish. And the next thing that we might do is use the adjustment brush. I want to zero out everything on here. I know there's a quick key to do it and I can't remember what it is, so I'm just double clicking on each one. I want to take out any color, and the one thing I want to do is add a negative clarity, and what this will do is it will allow us to soften the skin a little bit. So you end up with something like that. It retains all the pores. You can soften it even more if you wanted to, but I wouldn't do it to the point that you take out all the pores. You can then create a new adjustment, and at this point I'll take out or increase the clarity and work on the eyes. So for the eyes, I will probably increase the saturation so that her eyes are bluer, and I might increase the contrast. You could also add another new one around here to darken just around the tops of the eyes, even darken the lips. So you have options with this. I didn't grade too hard on this one. I'm going to do one more thing, which will involve resetting a few of these, and that is, this area here. I'm surprised that highlights isn't taking it out. Maybe it's a shadow. It's taking out that shadow area here. Sometimes you can remove it just by getting the opposing color. So the opposite of red is cyan, which again should have taken that out, but because I've spread it elsewhere, I'm going to remove that. And just bring it down a size. and I'm just trying to take out as much of that as I can. Doesn't help that I had the saturation on. And let's just pull up the exposure a little bit, and there it goes. So if I take the overlay off, you can see what I was able to do. I would also take out that with the dodging and burning, these areas in the eyes as well. You may even enhance the eye color. Enhancing the hair color is pretty easy. And I'm not going to do the whole thing, but just increasing the saturation to bring up a little bit of extra color on there. And of course, you can darken that. I need to turn my pins back on so you can see them. So that was the bit that I was working on. Oh, it's green. It's supposed to be red. So you see I was able to darken up that saturated colour. I can sharpen it too, to make the hair a little bit sharper, and highlight it. It's going to let me do that. Might need shadows to highlight, so you can brighten up the hair. So there's a lot of things that you can do with portraiture and retouching. I'm just going to hit done to that. And the last one, the plane, this was the trickiest. You can use the white balance slider, but there is a white balance tool. It is this one here. I is the quick key to get to it, but it's next to the hand tool. When you use this one, you have to find somewhere that's going to be neutral grey. Now, obviously, I've taught this class a lot, so neutral grey, that's neutral grey. That's the actual colour that the image should be. A lot of you had problems with this one because you really just didn't know what it was supposed to look like, and, you know, I can accept that. I just wanted to give you a really tricky one to do. But as you can see, this is really tungsten lit, and this is what the natural colour should look like. So hopefully that's given you an overview of what all these can be and how to approach them, and where some of you went wrong. You know, it wasn't too tricky to do, but I wanted to have that for you. So if you are still feeling uncomfortable with Camera Raw, you're able to go in and figure out a few other things. I also have another Camera Raw video which just runs through some of the things you can do with the basic tab that I have online on my YouTube playlist, so you could also take a look at that. But remember, subtlety is the key. You don't want to be too subtle, but you don't want to be too over the top. So hopefully this will help those of you that struggled with some of these things.